Okay, I have a great show for you today. I have with me today Colonel Tony Shaffer. We're going to be going over what's going on in the Russia-Ukraine war situation. We're going to talk about the United States and our own problems. We're going to talk about the Israel-Gaza situation. And just out in the news, a whistleblower has come forward saying that the CIA has been a part of 9 secret missions to recover non-human technology, basically UFOs and UAPs. So we're going to jump into that. Colonel Shaffer, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Stephen, always great to be here with you. Thank you for having me.
I've got 7 or 8 big questions that I want to go through, but really
Sure.
quickly, I just want to give a shout out to today's video sponsor, Mr. 1920 Soap. This is the best gift that you could give at Christmas as a stocking stuffer. It's also the very best gift on the internet for under $10. I highly recommend it. All right, let's go ahead and jump into it.
Oh, and I have some too. See,
Oh,
I have.
yes.
That's right. There, cool water.
Cool water. I like that one. It actually smells like a light cologne for men. It's a good one. So, okay,
Yeah,
you were part of the Trump transition team,
I was.
and you saw that the deep state was beginning to make moves against Trump and also General Michael Flynn. I recently had General Flynn on my show,
Hmm.
but are these trials that we're seeing against the former president, are these part of the deep state again trying to ensnare him, embarrass him, shame him out of the election, or is there some validity to them trying to keep him out of office?
No, I think it's all related to their primary and continuing purpose of keeping him out of office. The one thing about Trump that I think is universally true is that he is an agent of change. He will change things. And the last thing the permanent bureaucracy wants, as well as the progressive left wants, is change because they like the direction of things. They control things. So the last thing you want is some knucklehead coming in and breaking all the China that you've worked so hard to set up. And so in 2016, Stephen, I don't know how directly you tracked the election, but it was very clear that the left and I'd say the traditional Republicans, the kind of mainstream Republicans, thought Trump was a joke, dismissed him. Just, oh, he's never going to be president. Nancy Pelosi said it. Everybody, Barack Obama said it. And there is a preconceived notion that it's just not possible. It's not going to happen. It's inconceivable. To quote, what's that great movie? It's inconceivable.
Inconceivable.
The child, the was it Princess Bride?
Yes.
Anyway, so it's inconceivable. I don't think you understand the meaning of the word you're using. Anyway, they were wrong, and as Trump prevailed in primary after primary state, they started getting worried, and I believe agents of the deep state were sent in to be spoilers. Jeff Sessions was a spoiler. There's a handful of other folks. I don't want to get them in trouble, but or get me in trouble by saying who I think they are because I don't have 100% of it. But I do believe Jeff Sessions was sent in there to be in just in case he wins. Let's have someone who can come in and sandbag him. So I think there was a lot of issues relating to how things played out on this issue regarding Trump. Nobody believed it, and then everybody believed it. And by the time Trump got in, it was too late. It's like, oh my God. And so the one man who was most dangerous to the enterprise was Mike Flynn. Mike Flynn, who I knew before he left DIA. We started communicating when he was still director. And I tried to give him advice when he was there. It's like, you're facing a permanent bureaucracy which is going to undo everything you try to do, and I know that from firsthand. I'd worked, as you know, I worked for DIA, Defense Intelligence, under a really good director named Pat Hughes, Lieutenant General Pat Hughes. Pat and I are still friends. Pat was an old school intelligence officer who came through the system and was no nonsense. So I watched firsthand how they undermined Pat. And then after him, a vice admiral named Tom Wilson. Tom Tom and I are back in communication. We plan on meeting at some point. And I saw them do it to Tom. So I basically tried to give Mike the benefit of my experience, saying, dude, they're going to do it to you. It doesn't matter what your intentions are. They're coming after you. And the one thing I'll say about Mike, and I've said this to his face, he doesn't listen. Sometimes Mike will get it in his head that he's a general and he's smarter than everybody else. And I've said this to his face. So I'm not saying anything to your audience I haven't said to Mike. But I did warn him at Trump Tower as a member of the transition, Stephen. I went up and met with him right before Christmas, where he was working out the details of the National Security Council. There was a couple things we had to coordinate between the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and the White House. I'll leave it at that right now. I don't want to get into a lot of details, but we were coordinating on that, and there's certain decisions that had to be made on the transition team. So we presented them, we discussed them. I had meetings at the Pentagon later that month where they were resolved. But suffice it to say that during that meeting, I pulled Mike out in the hall, away from KT McFarland. KT McFarland was in the other room, and it was just Mike and I said, Mike, they're going to come after you. What do you mean? They're going to come after you. Why are you saying this? I'm saying this because you aren't supposed to be here. You aren't supposed to be coming back into power. You're not supposed to be able to come back and review everything they're doing and make decisions on what can and cannot be done. They're going to come after you. Well, I don't have time for this. You better make time for this, because you don't understand what you're facing. I don't, Tony, I think this is ridiculous. No, you need to listen. This is not Lieutenant Colonel Shaffer to General Flynn. This is Tony to Mike. You need to listen. They don't care. They don't care what they're going to do. They're going to come after you, and they're going to undermine you. And he stops. He says, Tony, my job is to give the best advice to that man. Donald Trump was down the hall. And that's what I got to focus on. It's not going to matter, Mike, if you don't pay attention. They're going to come after you. And he blew me off. He wouldn't listen. He would not listen. He thought I was being over the top and ridiculous. And it's like I said, I ended the conversation by saying, Mike, there's a reason I've survived in Washington over the past 15 years as a whistleblower. I've learned things. You need to listen to what I'm telling you. Your rank is not going to matter. It doesn't matter you're a Democrat. They're just going to come after you because they don't want you there. So anyway, the rest is history, and we all know what happened. And again, I'm not saying anything to you and your audience I have not said to Mike personally. Yeah. And I've said to him, I said, you should have listened. We've had constructive breakfasts, working breakfasts in Old Town Alexandria, and we talked about this. But it doesn't change the fact that certain generals, even Mike is prone to this, to believing somehow their rank will give them immunity and wisdom over the things that they face. And obviously it didn't work out well. But back to your point, yeah, they wanted Mike out of the way. And I'm not the only person who gave Mike this warning. There's some other very prominent members of the media who gave Mike the same warning. And suffice it to say, I think Mike did not understand, nor did Trump, the scope and depth of the deep state. So I think they walked right into it.
Wow. Yesterday, I had Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin on my show.
Great guy. Yeah.
He said, with no uncertain terms, he believes Biden, or whoever's running Biden, is purposely allowing the United States southern border to be overrun.
No doubt.
What's your take on his comments?
So I appreciate Senator Johnson. I think he's been studying this more than a day. He's a very practical guy. He's not an extremist. I mean, this is one of the nice things about dealing with professionals like him. I've briefed him. I've met him on infrastructure issues in the past. And he's really kind of like, no nonsense. Let's just figure out things. And so I don't see him as a MAGA guy, as a matter of fact. He's just kind of like a conservative who has concerns about the welfare of his state and the United States. And he's correct. The southwest border, the problem wasn't solved under Trump, but it was mitigated. And it was mitigated by the fact that they were able to establish cohesive border controls at the border. They were building the wall. They were doing other things to begin to reduce the flow. Secondly, the remain in place policy. If you come from Argentina or Honduras and you end up at our border, it's like, dude, you should have gone and sought refugee status in your home country, not Mexico. So Mexico was playing ball and keeping them out. It's like, no, you got to hang out here. Things like that were effective. And then when you bring Mayorkas in, who's a politician first, a political dweeb of the political left. He's going to do whatever he can to basically put up a good show, but do the opposite of what he's saying he's doing, and he's not following the law. So Johnson's completely correct. I think we now have a 15% increase in our overall population just based on this illegal migration. It's amazing to see the numbers, and I don't know how people in Texas are handling it. I live in a very small community here. The whole county, Chowan County, is just a tick under 14,000 people. And you have that number coming in, I think, on a daily basis in some places in Texas. And I don't know how that's possible, but it's being done purposely, I believe.
Yeah, wow. That's yeah, there's towns that 10,000 coming in within like a 48-hour period. It's just overrun. Let's head over to Ukraine.
Yeah.
Is it your military opinion that Zelensky is facing diminishing internal support from his generals and some members of NATO? And will they pressure him to step down, retire, or are they just going to allow this clown show to keep going and killing all of these Ukrainian people?
So we've talked about this before, Stephen. And I think a lot of folks were skeptical of what we were saying. I don't know how I don't have time to go through and look at all the feedback on the interviews you and I do, but I think there's been skepticism in some circles about the view that Ukraine was going to win. If you study Ben Hodges' comments, General Hodges, Dave Petraeus, they've given this rosy, even now, oh, it's just a setback. You know, what's that? Remember, I'm a big fan of movies. Remember that the night, you know, oh, it's just a flesh wound. You know, he's got his arms and legs cut off. It's just a flesh wound. That's where we're at. I mean, if you want a visual, that's the night, that night with all of his. Oh no, it's just a flesh wound. No, it's bad. And so the question becomes, what is Zelensky going to do, which is in the interest of his people? And I don't think he is able to make that assessment right now. He seems to be in a battle with General Zaluzhny over the future direction of the war, and by all accounts, they're losing, and they're losing badly. And it's not like you can hide it anymore. Even though the Zaporizhzhia is another area where there's more battles ongoing right now. There's massive stolen chief NATO chief Stoltenberg says Ukrainian troops have inflicted massive casualties on the Russians, but they won't give numbers. So it's all about propaganda at this point. And the question becomes, can Zelensky continue to maintain control of his own government, since his own military now is questioning their ability to continue to hold off the Russians? Because I think, Stephen, this is what my forecast is. The Russians are going to continue to do what they can to make local gains, nothing big. They're going to allow for the Ukrainians to continue to use the combat power that we've given them uselessly against their defenses. Let it wear down. And then January, February, mark my words, is when the Russians are going to consider a massive extended offensive that they will have the option to take, because everybody's lost interest in Ukraine. There's going to be very little in the way of credible military aid from the West. I think everybody gave what they thought they could. The F-16s aren't going to show up in time. The additional armor that we've given them, the M1s, there's going to be little to no effect. It's just, I think it's in the best interest of the Ukrainian people to rethink this. And I'm not pro-Russian. I'm not pro-Ukrainian. I'm simply looking at this as someone who's studied history and studied military issues relating to policy. There's nothing there for the Ukrainian people to continue to work under the Zelensky leadership, because all he'll do is get them killed. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, I do read the comments, and I talk to people, and they would say things like, I can't believe that you are saying that Ukraine is going to lose. There was a general on CNN who said that we're winning.
yeah.
And all of a sudden it was like, wait a minute, we're losing? These guys are losing? Like, they've run out of people. They've run out of weapons. They need another $60 billion of our money. And it was like, all of a sudden, just one day, the story couldn't hold up anymore. Probably Israel, right? All of a sudden it was like, wait a minute, what happened to Ukraine? I thought we were supporting these guys. I thought we were paying higher gas prices to stick it to Putin. And then now they're realizing, oh, wait a minute, Ukraine is losing. And I'm like, listen, I've been telling you this. I'm not pro Putin.
Yeah.
I'm not
I'm not. Yeah,
anti-Ukraine.
I know.
I'm just telling you the truth. Russia is beating Ukraine.
Yeah.
And like they couldn't hear it because, you know, Fox News or CNN or has somebody on that's saying, oh, well, we're going to get them this money. We're going to get them this or that. You know, General Milley says this, General Austin says this. It's like, yeah, they say these really vague, positive things all the time.
Yeah.
We're giving them all of our support. What does that mean? There's been massive casualties. What does that mean? Give me a number.
Yeah.
But they won't. They won't put a number value to it.
So to me, this is all. It's always been about numbers. Now, I've another topic we should talk about another day is environmental studies and the issues of new green energy and all that. Because you know, I that whole thing is a sham, and I can go through the numbers on that. I'm a numbers guy. Well, I do have political leanings and beliefs. Fundamentally, my belief is I took the oath of office. If I'm in a position of authority, either as a military officer, an intelligence officer, a media personality, my job is to try to tell the truth as best I understand it. And even if that truth is inconvenient to the political narrative of the people in charge. And trust me, as you know, we've talked about this. I've gotten a lot of trouble going against the narrative, even if it's, you know, back when I was a whistleblower, I went against the Bush 43 folks, and I would do it again. But in this case, you're talking about credible officers. Well, I should say formerly credible officers, such as Petraeus and Hodges, who simply either sold out or gave in to the pressure of the political party in charge, which is the Obama, Biden, whatever you want to call the morass, and the belief that to tell the American public that we were winning and going to win in Ukraine was the best thing to do. And even I believe either they're completely stupid, which I don't think they are, or they were bought out. And I think it's the latter. And I think shame on them, and they should never be permitted to serve in any position of authority again, based on the fact that they cannot be trusted to actually tell the truth to the American people.
Yeah, well, their pay from CNN is directly tied to saying whatever CNN wants them to say.
Yes.
And another example of that is look at Anderson Cooper. Almost $9 million of his annual pay comes from big pharma.
Yeah.
Do you think he's ever going to tell the truth about COVID?
No.
Never.
No.
He's so biased.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, and Stephen, that's why we need independent voices. You know, the money's in the margins, the money's, you know, in the extremes, and that's like fine. You know, I do believe that, you know, while my think tank, our think tank struggle, I'd rather be in a position where we're struggling and telling the truth rather than taking money and selling out. And a lot of, I don't know, you know, I think people should be obligated to try as best they can to tell, especially when people's lives are in jeopardy, either in war or in medical issues. And it's a shame. So,
yeah. Do you think that NATO is ever going to try to force Zelensky's hand to the peace table or some kind of settlement agreement? Because at some point, you know, I have to imagine they're going to be exhausted from giving support. They're also going to be embarrassed. Their reputation, their ego is going to take a hit. But they keep saying things like, well, this is on Ukraine's timetable. We're letting Ukraine determine what happens to Ukraine. But none of it is Ukraine's weapons. None of it's Ukraine's money.
right.
It's just Ukraine's bodies, and they're running out of bodies.
So, there's a parallel here. I've heard certain folks talk about. There's rumors of the potential what would happen if Ukraine doesn't abide and seek some sort of diplomatic settlement. And I do find a couple of folks talking about this to be credible. If you recall, Stephen, our own civil war, I do consider many aspects of the current war between Russia and Ukraine a civil war. They were locked at the hip for a long time. And Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union. They were part of Russia before the Soviet Union existed. So in many aspects, I think this is history does not repeat, but it rhymes. And I think there's many aspects of this that parallel our own U.S. Civil War back in 1861 to 65. If you recall, there was no surrender of the South to the North. It just collapsed. It just fell in on itself. Basically, Grant at Appomattox was the beginning of the end. A general surrendering was the beginning of the end for the South. Jefferson Davis never sat down and had a formal, the South is giving up. He was captured incidental to being on the run, I think, in Tennessee. So that could be the future for Ukraine if they don't abide. That is to say, if they don't figure out now is the time to sit down face to face with the Russians and try to figure out how to go back to the agreement they almost had, I think, right at the beginning of the war. About 3 or 4 months in, there was talks about going to a negotiated settlement. If they don't do it, I see a collapse coming of their military because the Western aid is going to be cut off. It already is in the process of being cut off. The funds are being cut off. The Russians are now on wartime footing. They're not backing down. They don't have to back down. There's sanctions have failed. There's no political force out there that's going to stop them from doing what they believe is necessary based on their strategy and their interpretation of history. It is what it is, Stephen. And so I do see if Zelensky does not get a hint from NATO, if NATO, and I don't think NATO is going to force it on him. I think you're right. It's like we're waiting to see what they want to do. Well, if the Ukrainians don't do the right thing, they're going to collapse.
Yeah. This made me laugh, but then also like made me shake my head. But the president of the Czech Republic, Peter Pavel, said that NATO needs to give Ukraine their full support, or they risk allowing Moscow to get the upper hand in 2024. How would Moscow get an upper hand? Don't they already have the upper hand?
I mean, the statements like that without any context that are totally insane. I mean, I don't believe the Russians are looking to challenge NATO at all, the whole thing. I think Poland has made it very clear they're ready to fight them. I don't think they want to take on the Poles. Poles would vigorously defend themselves. Latvia, all the different states in the Baltic would kick their ass. It would be a battle. Don't get me wrong. The Russians could do it very well, but it would be a very bloody battle. It would be what we envisioned to happen in 1985 at the Fulda Gap. That's how bad it would get. And we had really bad vision, Stephen, of how bad it would get in a Warsaw Pact versus NATO war. And I think it would be that brutal and bloody. With that said, I don't think Putin wants to go in that direction. The Russians are trying to reestablish a functioning economy, which they've done a very good job from all accounts. They're actually recovering from the sanctions. They're moving on. They're part of BRICS. They're doing all the things necessary to reestablish a role in the world that obviously Putin was denied from the West. So they're moving on. It's like, yeah, we're done. We're going to go on this direction. We will take back what we think we want, which is those elements of Ukraine, which they have now seized. But I don't think they want Ukraine to be Russian necessarily. I think they want it to be neutral. They will not let it be part of NATO. But I don't think they care if it becomes kind of a neutral state. They want a buffer zone. It is part of the Russian paranoia. It is what it is. You're never going to change that. The Russians have a paranoia, and I used to have a list of countries that invaded them. I don't have it on hand. I think we talked about it before. The Russians are paranoid, and they have reasons to be paranoid, and that's not going to change. So,
yeah. From what I gather, they want to pick up those regions that has a very dense Russian population within Ukraine, but then maybe use the river as like a natural, wall
barrier.
or barrier, and have that buffer. But NATO keeps saying 100% we're going to allow Ukraine in, and I just think Putin is
never
not going to back down until they're made a neutral zone.
Yeah. The neutral zone is the only answer, and NATO knows that. This is all just bluster at this point. So,
wow. Okay, let's go down to Israel and Palestine. There's talks of maybe the United Nations getting involved and trying to hold each side accountable with a two-state solution. Do you see a two-state solution happening? And if it did, how would that work? Like new leadership in both countries with the United Nations overseeing that?
So the UN actually has an observation mission in the Sinai. I don't know if you knew that, but there's still, so the U.S. military provides observers because the end of, I think, the 74 war was a UN effort to put observers in to make sure that the Israelis and Egyptians didn't fight. They're long past that, but the observation mission continues. We still send folks there, and it's become something of I think I don't know how to describe it actually, because it's good to have that tie, but it's a bit of a vestige that can be let go, because I don't think the Egyptians are going to invade Israel anytime soon. But that format may work. I don't know if it would work or not, but I know that that is something the UN did permit or was involved in, is putting up a series of observers to make sure that both sides do not go back to fighting after the 74 war. It worked. Would it work here? I don't know, because the Egyptians were committed to moving in a different direction, and they did. I don't think Hamas is going to be committed to moving in a different direction. I think that at this point, until leadership is removed completely from both, the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, and have people who basically don't have in their political tenets the destruction of Israel and Israelis, I just don't think it's going to be compatible. You can't have a state or an organization that fundamentally believes that it has the right to murder and eradicate a complete group of people from the earth. There's many parallels here to the Nazis regarding Hamas. As a matter of fact, there's a person who's been kind of the de facto spokesman, one of these young women who's in Palestine, actually on her Twitter made pro-Hitler comments. And if that's not a clue, I don't know what is, regarding how she feels that Hitler didn't do the job to finish off the Jewish folks. And that's bad. And so as long as you have people who believe that, there's no peace. There's not going to be any peace. And so I just don't think the Israelis are going to have much choice other than to go in and completely take over and retain control of the Gaza Strip for at least a couple years until they can figure out what to do. I don't think the UN would have the ability to do that. So,
okay. And is that because at the end of the day, the UN is going to do whatever the US tells them to do regarding Israel?
No, I don't think so. I think in this case, I think the United Nations would be happy to jump in, because I think they the UN would believe they're helping Hamas or helping the Palestinians.
Okay.
There's not much of a difference between Hamas and the Palestinians and Gaza, but I think the UN would jump in if they could. I just don't think the Israelis are permitted, because the Israelis, I think, recognize that, again, going back to the end of 74, between Egypt and the Israelis. Egypt fundamentally, I think their leadership wanted to move in a different direction. I think that's apparent. I've been to Egypt and on delegations, and the Egyptians like the direction of things. They like the fact that their societies moved in a much more pro-Egyptian and less radical Islamic direction. And they're benefiting from that. Their people are becoming more prosperous. I think they're on a road to prosperity. It's a process. It's not going to happen overnight. So they did take that path, and I think they've benefited from it. Hamas has no interest in that at this point, Stephen. I just don't think they've had economic benefits. They've had logistical benefits. They've been given all sorts of aid, and all they've taken and done with that aid, they built tunnels and made missiles. So I just don't know if I don't think any amount of UN support would do much to help the situation at this point.
Yeah, that's what I learned just yesterday, is that the UN has been sending significant amounts of donations, and that's how they built 300 miles of tunnels.
Right.
Was
exactly.
instead of feeding the children, educating the children, rebuilding the town, they built a whole new town underground so that they could fight better. It's mind-boggling to me.
So, and the other thing too, Stephen, just a couple of social issues I want to hit on this real quick. You can't be gay in Gaza. It's illegal. It's an offense. You can be gay in Israel. They don't care. You can be gay as you want. You can rape your wife in Gaza because Islamic law. You have the right to do whatever you want. Women are chattel. So if you just look at the social issues, we shouldn't be on their side. The basic tenets of Sharia that Hamas has implemented are against not only Western civilization, they're against everything we stand for in our Constitution. So I'm just saying, if you want to sit down and look at who the good guys and bad guys are, I don't think it takes that long to figure out just looking at social issues, who they are. So,
yeah, I saw, I think it was a TikTok where a guy went on a college campus and he said, "Hey, we're trying to get 100,000 signatures to support Hamas. Can you do that?" And everybody was like, "Oh yeah, of course. This is horrible. What's going on over there? Let me sign that." And he goes, "Well, let me just read you the terms of this. In order to support them, you have to be willing to kill all the gays and lesbians. You have to be willing to kill the Jews and all of the Christians. You have
yeah,
to talk about Christianity, any of those. You have to, betray your family."
right.
And people were like, "Ooh, no, I'm not signing up for that." And he's like, "That's exactly what it's right in their charter.
Yeah,
You
I
have
know.
to comply with those things," and not one single person signed. Now, there is this idea of, okay, there's Palestine, there's Hamas, there's Israel, and it's really hard to hold those three as like separate buckets because there is a lot of crossover.
Right,
But yeah, Hamas has no intentions of not stopping their attacks on Israel.
right.
And we'll see what happens with this ceasefire that's supposed to come to an end here, I think later today. Whether that continues or whether Israel starts their march again. Let's switch over to a different topic because there's not, most Americans don't have access to somebody who's been a whistleblower and what that can do to your life. But
Yeah,
uh, a new whistleblower came forward, according to front page of the Daily Mail yesterday,
yeah,
and said that the CIA, this is a CIA whistleblower, the CIA has been called in around the world to retrieve at least 9 non-human crafts from UFO sites. Most of them were wrecked, but 2 of them were fully intact.
yeah.
Um, could this be, stories that are being, marched out in the public in order to distract us from the Biden economy? Could there be some truth to this? Could it be both?
So it could be both. And I think, first off, the Biden economy, yeah, they're doing everything they can to distract from it. I mean, come on, Stephen. I was on a trip recently with my son. And when you go into a fast food place and you get a burger, fries, and a drink for $20 for 2 people, that it didn't used to be that bad. It was half that. So yeah, you can't fool us about how bad things are. Regarding the overall direction trajectory of that, I know that there's been classified programs that they're called SAP, special access programs, which are beyond top secret. They're compartmented. There's multiple levels of compartments. It's the X Files. I don't know if I told you that the X Files contain far more truth as a TV series than people fully understand. And it was, they hinted at things which were going on. With that said, the CIA wasn't the main organization that was tasked with recovery. There are other three-letter organizations which were involved in that more directly. NRO in particular is one. I know CI is very heavy into NRO, so that may be. I haven't heard this guy, but that may be where the overlap is. And regarding recovery, there's a number of programs that I'm aware of, but I was not read into, that related to how to categorize, move, and store what would be considered exotic technologies. One of my specialties when I was an operative was weaponization of technology. And basically, we would examine from a DoD perspective, how can something be used to support military operations, combat operations, or other things which needed to be used to essentially diminish the enemy's ability to fight or demolish their command and control. So as we examine these things, the analogy of that, the other side of that is technology we recover. So there were programs out there to recover that stuff, and maybe that's where they're starting to leak some of this stuff. And again, I've mentioned before a program which I do recommend people pick up, The Day After Roswell. Philip Corso talks about using the Army's tranche of technology from Roswell. I'm not vouching for this. I'm saying this is what he said, and I'm aware that programs existed that theoretically could have been receiving this. The day after Roswell, Colonel Corso says he witnessed the technology being moved to Fort Belvoir, Virginia, to what became the Night Vision Lab. This is in here. I'm not saying it's true. I'm just saying it's in here. And then that technology was used to move U.S. technology forward on a regular basis. There's others who say that there's more technology out there than we know. So this could be an effort to try to start getting that out to the public domain. So
yeah, kind of interesting to think about. Like, are these like new crafts that were recently found, or are these like ancient technologies that people have come across that have been here for, you know, thousands or tens of thousands of years? And then to say, you know, most of them were wrecked, but two of them were fully intact. Like, what the heck does that look like? You know, just interesting to give thought. I'm always suspicious when things aren't going well with the economy or an election, and then all of a sudden you see UFOs be trotted out. But more and more, there's these credible whistleblowers coming forward, and they have a lot of details. For example, I sent you that the newest Joe Rogan, where he has the whistleblower,
I'm gonna look at that.
David Grush on, and Grush, you know, answers as much as he can. But I was shocked how many times he's like, I can't go into that program. I can't detail this. I can't tell you that. I can confirm that, but I can't, you know, give you any more details. That's where I thought, you know, it's really interesting. The one thing that came out that I thought was really interesting was he said that he went and met with Harry Reid, the most powerful member of Congress for many, many years, a Democrat from Nevada. And he said that he knew for a fact that these programs existed, but even with his top level clearance, he was denied access to almost all of it.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, let's try to put in some context for the audience. First, let's say Christopher Columbus found a nuclear submarine. Finding the submarine and knowing its advanced technology doesn't mean you can do anything with it, right? I mean, you know, he's sailing along, finds America, and oh, hey, there's a big nuclear submarine over there. Wow, that's pretty cool. How does it work? I don't know.
Yeah.
So that's part of the dilemma of finding some of this stuff apparent. Just saying, if it happened, just saying. And then secondly, deep state. We've been talking about the deep state does a lot of stuff that the deep state believes it does, you know, based on what it believes is best for itself. So never doubt the interest of certain political, unaccountable political appointees or government officials who have virtually unaccountable power, and they've learned how to maintain that power and hand it down rather than have oversight. So I think there's a lot of things that could happen within the context of that.
Yeah. So within this article, the person pointed out that according to a 2015, so this is 8 years old, a 2015 National Archives record document, the CIA has 9 science and technology departments that they never discuss with the public sector. So it's like they admitted it in this, like, you know, document, but then there's like no other information about it. Is this why the Pentagon just failed an audit and they don't know where $3 trillion is?
That's complicated. So I do know that the Pentagon tends to fund things doubly. That is to say, they're going to have compartmented programs, what they don't want to discuss. There's 4 levels of special access program. I don't want to, the actual existence of the top 2 I can't talk about, but there's acknowledged and unacknowledged, and then there's 2 above that, which I shouldn't even acknowledge. Duh. But anyway, they actually develop technologies and capabilities based on what the Pentagon senior leadership, believe is going to be necessary to win the next war. And a lot of these things exist both in the DARPA open world and the DARPA closed world. And I can't explain it. And I don't understand why Congress doesn't say enough's enough, because Congress should be saying, we're giving you money. Look, that's how I became a whistleblower. I was sent over to ask for money for the Navy to recreate Able Danger technology. And Kurt Weldon, Congressman Weldon, said, we gave you money for this. Where'd it go? It's like, oh, yeah, that's right. So I'm just telling you, Stephen, it's a game. It's a big, big, big game. And the people who are most successful, at least from the Pentagon's perspective, are those who can get the biggest budgets. I don't think like that. Obviously, I'm not a CEO at McDonnell Douglas or some other, Boeing or something. Not something I want to do. But people do it and they figure it out. And that's where a lot of power is sustained by those who contain those programs. And yeah, they'll double dip, triple dip. If they can get the money, they'll go do it. So.
Yeah, they love getting access to that tax.
That's why they fail to audits, because nobody wants to be accountable. That's why.
Yeah. Okay. Another thing that was mentioned in this Joe Rogan interview is that this whistleblower said that he was given permission. He can't say what technology they have, where it came from, how old it is, whether they've mastered it or ever used it, or whether they're sharing it. But he said that those above him who he coordinated with to go public told him that he could say weapons manufacturer Lockheed Martin is in possession of alien technology. And that's as much as he was able to say.
So look, my experience is similar in that when I was called, when the Navy sent me over to ask for money for their recreation of Able Danger, I was over there as an Army guy. I know this is one of those strange but true things. And when I started getting hard questions, I had to report back to Army. And I reported back to Army leadership. I said to the number 3 guy in Army intelligence, I said, hey, this is what just happened. I reported my presence on Capitol Hill. I reported the questions. What do you want me to do? And the answer from Army leadership was, tell them what they want to know and tell them the truth. That's it. That was my guidance. Like, oh, okay, I can do that. And so within the context of what I was authorized to do regarding classified programs, I did. Certain programs, Army was fine with me talking about. Others, which were way further compartmented, I couldn't talk about, even in closed sessions. I was actually in a closed session where the Chief of Staff of the House Armed Service Committee was waving at me, don't say anything about this other program, even with these people in the room. So I'm serious. He was like, literally, no, don't say anything.
Yeah.
So I'm just telling you that we will get out as much information as we can as whistleblowers, but there's certain points where I understand why the government wants to keep certain things secret. In this case, I don't know what his limitations are, but I do know that the pattern sounds familiar based on what I had to do.
Okay. Because he did say that there were certain things that even if he was given permission, he wouldn't share with Joe Rogan because he doesn't want China or Russia.
That was part of what I did too. Yes, that was part of what I did too. Absolutely. Yes,
Yeah,
there's
so
certain things that I don't want to acknowledge we can do.
Yeah, even though I know these things, he's like, I don't know the repercussions of what would happen if these other countries knew what we have. It just builds so much suspense,
Yeah.
I'm very curious on the topic.
So, Stephen, and to that regard, there's certain capabilities which I do believe we should sustain and maintain as an edge. My issue has been, and I've made protected disclosures to this point, especially with Louis Gohmert and others, that this stuff should never be turned on the American people, and some of it has. And that's my issue. How do you preserve the technology and edge without giving up the fact that some of it's been used against the American people? That's the dilemma many of us face right now. And that's something that we face and try to work through. So we want to maintain the edge, protect the American people. We want who took the oath of office to make sure that that technology and those things aren't used against the American people. And that's what we've seen the left trying to do, is try to use these things against the American people, which is not permissible in my view. So.
Wow. Well, Colonel Shaffer, thank you so much for coming on. I know how
Thank you, Stephen.
And this has been an interesting conversation. Obviously, people want to understand this war, but a lot of us don't have that military experience. So we appreciate you filtering it through, and then I appreciate you allowing me to pick your brain about this UFO stuff that just keeps popping up in the news more and more. So
yeah.
Yeah. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you again for coming on.
All right, thank you. And the truth is out there, just saying, just in case.